This is the Global News podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Janat Jalil, and at 14 hours GMT on Monday the 24th of December, these are our main stories. A desperate search for survivors in Indonesia, where another tsunami has caused destruction and hundreds of deaths. After being found guilty of fresh corruption charges, former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is jailed for 7 years. And explosions and gunfire in the heart of the Afghan capital, Kabul, as a government ministry comes under attack. Also in this podcast...
This is the first time in my life I'm camping here. This is wonderful. Merry Christmas.
We hear why tourist numbers in Bethlehem are up this year. And what can we expect to hear in the Christmas Day speech by the Queen? In Indonesia, rescuers are frantically searching for survivors of the tsunami that struck West Java on Saturday, killing more than 370 people. More than 1,000 others are reported injured and many buildings destroyed. Residents of the coast near the Anak Krakatau volcano have been warned to keep away from beaches amid fears that eruptions could trigger a new tsunami. Kathy Muller from the International Federation of the Red Cross said the first priority is to rescue people who are trapped under the rubble.
We've heard from other disasters in the past, miracles where people have survived weeks in the rubble of an earthquake or a tsunami for that matter. People can survive quite a long time without food. It is the rainy season here, so there's always the possibility that if someone is trapped, that the rain is trickling through and they're able to take the raindrops of water that are coming through.
Our correspondent in Indonesia, Rebecca Henschke, is in the worst-hit area of Banten province. And just before we recorded this podcast, she described the scene there.
Well, at the moment, I'm at a hospital where the injured are coming and also loved ones who have missing family members. They will be pleased to hear what the Red Cross spokesperson just said about the possibility that there might be people still alive, because families here are very much holding out hope for that. They're coming to make the grim task of identifying bodies that have arrived here, looking at those injured in the hospital. Across this coastal area, as we've been travelling through it, on either side of the road there is badly damaged buildings. The houses made of wood and bamboo closest to the beach have been completely destroyed. Some of the villas that were also on the ocean side very badly damaged. And today we saw soldiers working there trying to pull through the rubble looking for survivors. But today they've only been finding bodies there. So they're continuing that search tomorrow across the coast in the hope of finding people. But things are not looking good here.
Indeed, and the fear is that the number of dead will rise. The survivors that have been rescued, how are they being looked after?
Well, they're going into areas where they can gather and sleep. So mosques are being used, town halls are now filled with people. Those that have any means of getting out of this area to go and stay in relatives elsewhere. I mean, this area is a very popular local tourist destination, so people had flocked here for the holidays, for the end of the year. Now all those people are checking out and getting out of the area because of the lack of electricity in some parts and water, but also because authorities are warning that because there's still volcanic activity out at Anak Krakatau in the Sunda Straits, that there could be a follow-up tsunami. So that's also got people here very much on edge.
Our correspondent in Indonesia, Rebecca Henschke. It's been a turbulent year for the former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison in July by an anti-corruption court, then freed on appeal. But now that same court has again jailed the three-time Prime Minister on separate corruption charges over a business deal in the Middle East, this time for 7 years. I heard more from Asif Faruqi of the BBC's Urdu service.
as soon as the verdict was announced, he was arrested from inside the courtroom, and the court ordered for him to go to a jail in Rawalpindi, which is near Islamabad, some 30 kilometers. But Nawaz Sharif put in a request immediately that he be allowed to go to a jail in Lahore, which is his hometown. The court is still discussing the matter. It has to decide that matter, but he was given 7 years imprisonment and $25 million fine for owning a steel mill in the UAE, which he did not declare in his assets sheet in Pakistan. Under Pakistani law, if you contest an election, you have to declare each and every asset that you own, whether inside the country or overseas.
But he himself says that the charges against him are politically motivated, doesn't he?
Yes, all these 4 cases against him all stem out of Panama leaks, in which it was disclosed that he and his family owns offshore companies and properties abroad. But Nawaz Sharif says that nothing was illegal in that way, but he was being pressured by the Pakistan's powerful military because as a prime minister he did not have a good relationship with the military, and he says, or he claims, that military wanted him oust from the Prime Minister office, and he eventually did vacate the Prime Minister's house when he was convicted last year of owning properties in the UK.
Asif Faruqi of our Urdu service. A couple of hours before we came into the studio, reports emerged from Afghanistan of yet another assault on the capital, Kabul. A car packed with explosives was blown up outside Afghanistan's Ministry of Public Works, with gunfire then breaking out. At least 2 people are reported to have been injured. As we record this podcast, it's not yet clear who's behind this latest attack, but both the Taliban and IS have carried out similar assaults in the past. Our correspondent in Kabul, Shuaib Sharifi, gave me this update.
The Afghan Interior Ministry deputy spokesperson told me that it is believed that multiple explosions were suicide attackers and followed by armed attackers on one of these ministries, and it still is not confirmed what exactly the motive of this attack is, but it is believed adjacent to these 2 ministries there is an important military base tasked for protection of top government officials. It's believed that this building is in fact the motive of the attack. It is believed that security forces as well as civilians may have been hurt in this attack. It happened just before home time for hundreds of civil servants in these government buildings, and one civil servant from the Ministry of Public Works contacted from the ministry saying how terrified all the employees were as they could hear gunshots just in the courtyard of the very ministry. The ministry next to that announced that they managed to evacuate the employees from emergency exits, but the situation is still seen as active, and it's believed that they are armed attackers in the area.
The fact that an attack like this can be carried out in the heart of Kabul shows how the authorities are really struggling with security.
Well, yes, it is. In fact, the attack has happened not very far from a presidential palace, and this is one of the most secure parts of Kabul, and one will have to go through at least multiple layers of checkpoints to reach this area, and it was quite a shock for Kabul residents that so close. We are the end of 2018, and the year started with an attack on a government ministry, which scores were killed and wounded, and now we are at the very end of 2018. Sadly, here we are again. In fact, after some moment of quiet in Kabul, people were stunned and shocked again when they heard this news of attack.
And this violence is continuing amid reports that President Trump is planning to reduce the number of US troops in Afghanistan.
Yes, indeed, that people are already confused, shocked, and many, at least Afghan officials, surprised by President Trump's announcement of reduction of US forces. Many people were questioning based on what benchmarks or progress on the ground this troops reduction is taking place.
Shuaib Sharifi speaking to me from Kabul. In Sudan, anti-government protests seem to be gathering momentum. They began last week after the authorities raised the price of bread and fuel. Demonstrations soon followed, with reports that more than 20 people had been killed, although the government says the figure is much lower. Now doctors have gone on strike to increase the pressure on President Omar al-Bashir. My colleague, Alan Kasuja, spoke to the British Sudanese journalist and commentator Nesreen Malik.
It seems that it's an accumulation of frustration as opposed to an event-driven protest. In the past, there were protests that happened because subsidies were lifted or because there was certain economic conditions that had worsened in a sharp and dramatic manner. But specifically at this time, the economy has been going downhill slowly but certainly for about 2 years now, with inflation reaching the third highest in the world a couple of weeks ago. And so it does seem to be a sort of a straw that broke the camel's back rather than a response to a specific economic event, so to speak.
Are they also pursuing a change in leadership, do you think?
Well, this is an expression of frustration that has building for a very, very long time. And so, yes, certainly that frustration expresses itself in a desire to remove President Omar al-Bashir, who has been president for over 30 years now. So it would make sense that it would be directed towards him. And it does seem, by all accounts, that his government has run out of road economically and in terms of political capital regionally, that they seem out of moves.
Nesreen Malik. For more than 3.5 years, Yemen has been suffering a brutal civil war, which has spawned the largest humanitarian crisis on earth. More than 22 million people are now in need of assistance. The country is on the brink of famine, and Yemenis are also dealing with the worst cholera outbreak in modern history. The BBC has been hearing from 5 women living in very different parts of the country, sharing insights into their daily lives and hopes. We start today with Dr. Najla Al-Somboli, who heads the paediatric department in a major hospital in the capital, Sana'a.
The hospital where I'm working is just in front of a military camp. That camp was bombed many times, and whenever that camp bombed, a lot of my hospital is disrupted. And then after that, the security situation a bit better in Sana'a, but we are facing another problem that all of us have no salaries for the last 2 years. Also, we are facing the problem of the spread of a lot of epidemics of diseases such as the measles, the cholera, the diphtheria, all these doubling our work before. The biggest problem is that a lot of kids now come to us with severe malnutrition because people cannot afford food for them. Having a child under my care dying needlessly in front of my eyes make me feel so sad and feel I have to do something. Actually, I'm a graduate of Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. So my friends there, they are start to fundraise and they start to send a small amount of money. Although it's very small amount, but it makes a big difference. Alhamdulillah. So after their help, I started to feel some hope. I would like to thank them so much from the deepest of my heart. After more than 3 years of this conflict and war, we are so tired as doctors and nurses. I know some of my colleagues who even cannot get food for their kids. Doctors cannot get food for their kids. When we know about anyone that reached this situation, then we start to help him by paying him small amount of money. We try to cut from here or from there. But we need now someone to stand by us by just stopping this war. It is an option for me to leave Yemen and go work abroad and live in peace. But I decided to stay in Yemen because I felt that I'm responsible about the kids in this hospital. I'm head of that department. Yemen historically was named as the Happy Yemen, Al-Yemen Sa'id. So once put an end for this war, all the happiness of the life will come back and we will live again together. I would like to say Happy Christmas and Happy New Year for all of you, and I wish that the peace will dominate the world.
Dr. Najla Al-Somboli, head of the paediatric department at a hospital in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. Still to come in this podcast.
This is the Silent Night Chapel in the village of Oberndorf near Salzburg, and it's on the site of the place where Silent Night was first sung on Christmas Eve 1818.
We visit the birthplace of one of the world's best-loved Christmas carols and find out how it was written. To Bethlehem now, where large crowds have been enjoying the annual Christmas Eve procession in Manger Square, which centres around the Church of the Nativity. The acting Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, joined other religious leaders and dignitaries at the church ahead of the traditional midnight mass. This year, Palestinians say the birthplace of Jesus is enjoying one of its best ever years for visitor numbers, as these two tourists explained.
This place is very wonderful. I feel like it's really Christmas. I'm celebrating here. This is the first time in my life I'm camping here. This is a wonderful, Merry Christmas.
We are arriving with a group of Bulgarian tourists, and we like very much the atmosphere in Bethlehem because we can feel all the atmosphere, all the passionate people who are here to celebrate the birth of Christ.
And our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell told me more about this year's celebrations.
Well, visitor numbers are extremely good. I've spoken to quite a few people around town from South Korea, from different parts of Europe. I met some Americans, some Australians, and a lot of them are now behind me in Manger Square. This is where Christmas celebrations are really gathering pace. Different troops of Palestinian scouts are passing through, and they practice for months for this Christmas procession. This is when they escort the church leaders coming from Jerusalem. Right now, the acting patriarch of the Latin Catholic Church, Archbishop Pier Battista Pizzaballa, is making his way down Star Street. It's the traditional pilgrimage route into Manger Square, where I can see all the dignitaries, the local mayor, waiting for him. And then what happens later on, of course, there will be midnight mass in the Nativity Church. And according to the Palestinian Tourism Ministry, this is the best year on record for Bethlehem. There's been a real boom in tourism. It's recovered after some flare-ups and violence in the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which in recent years have really marred the celebrations. Last year, things were very flat after President Trump announced that the US was recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital in December of last year. Of course, Palestinians want East Jerusalem as the capital of their promised state. That led to a lot of unrest, and a lot of the celebrations last year were cancelled. This year, the message that's coming from Palestinian officials, from locals here, is that they really want to celebrate. They want to make this a happy Christmas.
Yolande Nell speaking from Bethlehem. Queen Elizabeth, Britain's longest-serving monarch, has carefully avoided commenting on contentious political issues during her 66 years on the throne. Every year she broadcasts a short personal address to the nation on Christmas Day. And this year she will urge people to treat each other with respect. The comments, which are being released by Buckingham Palace, are likely to be seen as an attempt by the monarch to calm the debate over Brexit. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
Throughout her reign, the Queen has always been notably cautious whenever it's come to making a comment which could be construed as an observation about the political debate. But with the nation divided over Brexit, it would be strange if the head of state, in her one personal message of the year, did not make some attempt to address people's concerns. Her Christmas message was recorded earlier this month at Buckingham Palace, when the Brexit debate in Parliament was at its height. In the broadcast, she will say this: Even with the most deeply held differences, treating the other person with respect and as a fellow human being is always a good first step towards greater understanding. The context of those remarks isn't clear from what Buckingham Palace has released. It may be doubted whether the Queen has said anything explicit about Brexit, but it's clear that the Palace is hoping these few words and a reference to the need for the Christmas spirit of goodwill to be heeded will be construed as an attempt by the monarch to soothe the Brexit debate.
Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell. Now, if you're still deciding what to get your loved ones for Christmas, how about a 15th century castle, or at least a piece of it? A French company is offering people a chance to be part owner of a chateau for around $60, and the deadline to raise the funds to buy the castle is Christmas Day. The firm running the crowdfunding campaign is called D'Artagnan, the name of one of the famous Three Musketeers, of course, and their head is Romain Delhomme. He told my colleague Shaima Khalil how this offer works.
This castle is part, of French history. We said that the King Louis XI spent a weekend on a week there, and is located in the center-west of France, just below the Loire Valley. And unfortunately, this castle is going to disappear if we don't do nothing in the coming years. So this is where we came up with this idea of giving the opportunity to everyone from all around the world to own a little share of this fairy tale castle.
Who owns it at the moment, Romain?
It's a Frenchman who is 82 years old. We came to him and say, okay, listen, we are a very small startup. We don't have a lot of money, so we will try to buy your castle with just thousands of people from every country and propose everyone to be one of the co-owners for €50.
So €50 or $60. Dare I ask how many people you need to actually pay for the castle, as in how much is it?
The castle cost actually €550,000, and we are almost raised 900,000, so almost the double of what was needed to buy the castle. So we can say now that the castle is being bought with almost 9,000 people from many countries. And so now we can say that thanks to the amount of money we have left, we will be able to start the relocation work starting in February.
So of course, because it's not just about owning the castle or buying the castle itself, it's about refurbishment and maintaining the actual building. It's interesting, though, because you say that this is part of French history, and I'm just wondering, well, why isn't the French government involved in maintaining this?
Yeah, actually, it's much more than just saving a crumbling castle. Is actually try to bring this fairy tale piece of history back to life. And actually, in France, when you are in a crisis and you have less money, the first thing that is damaged is often the cultural heritage system. So we said, okay, the government doesn't have enough money to save our heritage, so let's do that all together with all people from all around the world and give people like a real involvement in the castle rebirth, and have them participate also in the reconstruction program by making big decisions, and also, of course, having a free lifetime entrance in their castle.
Romain Delhomme, head of D'Artagnan. Today, the much-loved Christmas carol Silent Night is celebrating its 200th birthday. It was first performed in Austria in the village of Obendorf on Christmas Eve 1818. There are various legends about how it was written, but how true are they? Bethany Bell has been investigating.
Silent Night, or Stille Nacht as it's called in German, is 200 years old this Christmas. The carol comes from Austria. It was written by a priest and a schoolteacher who lived near Salzburg. Paul Estrella is organising the anniversary celebrations.
The story is that the teacher, Franz Xaver Gruber, and Joseph Mohr, the author of the lyrics, became friends. So Joseph Mohr asked Franz Xaver Gruber if he would compose a melody for the lyrics he had written.
This is the Silent Night Chapel in the village of Obendorf near Salzburg, and it's on the site of the place where Silent Night was first sung on Christmas Eve 1818. The original church where Joseph Mohr and Franz Xaver Gruber performed Silent Night doesn't exist anymore. It was badly damaged by floods in the late 19th century and had to be demolished. So a memorial chapel was built on its place. And you can see their stained glass windows to Franz Xaver Gruber and to Joseph Mohr. And there are 2 Christmas trees and a linen cloth which says Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, Silent Night, Holy Night. Silent Night was unusual for church music of the time. It was written not for the organ, but for the guitar, which you can still see today in the nearby village of Hallein.
This is one of our masterpieces in our museum collection, the original guitar on which...
According to legend, the guitar was used because the church organ had broken down, damaged by mice. But Florian Knopp, the director of the Stille Nacht Museum in Hallein, says the mice and the broken organ are probably just a myth.
We have enough evidence that we can say it was intentionally made for the guitar. It was, with the guitar, more people-friendly and not so formal. And also, if you consider, you can take the guitar wherever you go. And therefore, also, the song itself was known very quick all around the world.
Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht.
Silent Night quickly spread across Europe and onto the United States. It was sung across the trenches during the First World War. And for many people, it's simply the carol, which means Christmas.
Oh, I think it's the best Christmas song ever. It's a great part of Christmas, yes. It's really a perfect part of Christmas, yeah.
And would you sing it before Christmas or just on Christmas Eve?
Before and at Christmas Eve also, yes.
When the Christmas tree is illuminated, we sing Silent Night. It's familiar. We learned it when we were a child, and everyone sings it.
Schlafe in himmlischer Ruhe. Okay.
And that report from Austria was by Bethany Bell. And now, before we go, here's my colleague Jackie Leonard with some news about a very special seasonal edition of the Global News Podcast.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and in New Broadcasting House, producers were busy with computer and mouse, compiling the highlights of this last news year, tales of heroes and champions and folk of good cheer. No bad news, no sad news, no tales to cause fright, just news that convinced us we might be all right. So join us, dear listener, for come what may, the Happy News Pod is out Christmas Day.
Jackie Leonard who'll be presenting that special Happy News Pod, and you'll be able to find it in the Global News podcast feed. And that's all from us for now, but there will be an updated version of the Global News podcast later. If you want to comment on this edition or the topics covered in it, you can send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I'm Jeanette Jalil. Till next time, goodbye.